Chicago Fire Season 13 unexpectedly writes out a character ahead of Carver and Ritter's finale exit. Warning: spoilers ahead for Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 21. Head of Sam Carver and Darren Ritter's exit, Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 21. The bad guy effectively writes out one character. The One Chicago franchise is not new to cast leaving throughout its more than a decade on the air. As ensemble procedurals, Dick Wolf knows that actor rotations are part of what keeps his show fresh and long-running. That said, it would be an understatement to say that the last few years have been tumultuous at Firehouse 51, considering everyone that has left for various reasons. The Chicago Fire Season 12 finale saw the biggest departure of the show thus far. Chief Bowden left Firehouse 51 after a surprise promotion that would elevate his position in the CFT. Before that, Sylvie Brett and Blake Gallo also left. Between those and the weekly cast rotations as a cost-cutting ploy, it's sometimes difficult to remember which characters are still in the show. As it approaches the end of the year, Chicago Fire is once again losing two characters, Ritter and Carver. However, before their exits, the first responder procedural sneaks in another departure in The Bad Guy. In Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 21, Violet returns after skipping the previous week as part of NBC's cast rotating schemes. Unfortunately, her comeback comes with a slew of challenges, primarily when it comes to her personal life. Her resurgence also coincides with the reappearance of Flynn, the lawyer that Violet has been seeing since earlier this year. The pair immediately had a connection during their chance meeting, but while it seems like their relationship has been smooth sailing, there are issues bubbling on the surface. In the end, Violet decides to break up with Flynn, effectively ending his role in Chicago Fire. Flynn's suggestion about Violet becoming a doctor births a massive conflict between the pair. As it turns out, she has been dealing with the same passive-aggressive comments from those around her for years, ever since she chose to become a paramedic. There's no denying that Violet is good at her job, and being a doctor is attainable for her, assuming she wants to do it. In the end, Violet decides to break up with Flynn, effectively ending his role in Chicago Fire. Without his connection to her, there's very little to no chance of seeing him again. Violet and Flynn's conflict in Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 21 is technically about how she doesn't appreciate him, suggesting that she's settling in her job. That being said, the issue that broke them up isn't really about that. Flynn actually recognizes this immediately right after it sinks in that she is breaking up with him about something that they can seemingly talk about, assuming that both of them want to fix the mess. Sadly, that isn't the case. Ultimately, Violet has always been in love with Carver, even when she thought that she was having a good time with Flynn. At that point, however, she and her coworker couldn't find a way to make things work, considering their respective personal baggage. Carver hasn't been much of a factor in Chicago Fire Season 13 since he sought help for his alcoholism, but in his absence, Violet realizes how much he means to her. Flynn has been involved in other work-related plots during his time in Chicago Fire Season 13, but there is just not enough story for him in the show without his ties to Violet. He could still return in the future, especially since One Chicago is known for bringing back characters for shorter arcs to drum up nostalgia. Carver's inevitable exit in Firehouse 51, however that storyline plays out, might even be a path for him to appear in Chicago Fire Season 14. In the end, it's Violet who is in a lose-lose situation here. In a stunning mid-season twist that fans never saw coming, Chicago Fire Season 13 has delivered a shocker, writing out a beloved character weeks ahead of the highly anticipated finale that was already set to bid farewell to Sam Carver, Jake Lockett, and Darren Ritter, Daniel Peary. While longtime viewers were bracing for emotional goodbyes to Carver and Ritter, no one expected that another core member of Firehouse 51 would depart under such sudden and mysterious circumstances. The unexpected exit came in episode 11, titled Burnout, where Violet McCamey, Hanako Greensmith, the paramedic fans have watched grow, grieve, and love, abruptly left the station following a haunting call that triggered a personal reckoning. The episode began like any other. Engine 51 responding to a fiery car crash on Lakeshore Drive. But as Violet worked frantically to save a young girl trapped in the wreckage, something shifted in her demeanor. The camera lingered longer than usual on her expression, not just focused, but fractured. Back at the firehouse, her colleagues noticed the change. Brett tried to reach her, Seyfried offered one of his patented gruff pep talks, and Bowden expressed concern in his signature, quiet but commanding way. But it wasn't enough. By the episode's end, Violet submitted a letter of resignation, packed up her locker, and walked out of Firehouse 51. No dramatic monologue, no tearful send-off, just silence and a single line. "I need to breathe." Viewers were stunned. Social media erupted. What happened? Why now? The showrunners later confirmed that the character's exit was intentionally written to mirror the unpredictability of trauma and burnout in first responders, and that Violet's departure is open-ended, not necessarily permanent. But fans weren't satisfied with ambiguity. After all, McCamey had been central to several major storylines over the past 3 seasons, from her tumultuous relationship with Gallo to the grief arc following Hawkins' death. Her growth had become one of Chicago Fire's emotional anchors. Why pull her away now? Behind the scenes, insiders suggest that Greensmith requested time away from the show to pursue other opportunities, and the writers chose to honor that with a realistic, if jarring, storyline. But the ripple effect of Violet's departure is undeniable, especially with Carver and Ritter still set to exit in the finale. Firehouse 51 feels like it's undergoing a controlled burn of its own, with its foundation tested and its family fractured. The loss of Carver and Ritter was already going to mark the end of an era. Ritter, always the steady and compassionate voice amid chaos, has grown into a quiet hero over the seasons. His camaraderie with Mouch and Herman grounded the show in authentic, working-class firehouse culture. Carver, with his rough edges and complicated past, brought depth and vulnerability to what could have easily been a one-dimensional, tough guy role. His final arc, grappling with moral consequences from a call gone wrong, is already shaping up to be one of the most powerful stories the show has told in recent years. Now Violet's sudden exit adds a layer of uncertainty and urgency to what was already a season of goodbyes. Brett, set to take on a leadership role after her wedding to Casey, is now faced with rebuilding the paramedic team from scratch. Gallo, still reeling from losing both Ritter and Violet, might finally confront his own impulse to run when things get hard. And Bowden? He's watching the house he's held together for years slowly drift apart. Episode 12's teaser hints at a replacement paramedic arriving, a green, overly confident EMT named Lilo Ortiz, whose arrival is met with a mix of curiosity and resistance. Meanwhile, Chief Hawkins' ghost still lingers in the background, not literally, but emotionally, as Violet's absence reopens old wounds. In classic Chicago Fire fashion, personal and professional lives collide under pressure. But the show isn't all doom and departures. In the spirit of the series, there's also resilience. Brett, Seyfried, Cruz, and Kid rally together in the next episode to organize a community rescue workshop, a subtle nod to the importance of mentorship and legacy. With so many changes ahead, the writers seem to be planting seeds for a renewed Firehouse 51, not just coping with loss, but adapting, growing, and eventually healing.